to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And Jackson started the countdown this time, which fucking threw me for an absolute goddamned loop, which is why I sound disheveled and off right now, because...
well, clearly I am, too, because the only reason I did that was because my brain, blew a fuse. It skipped a track.
Okay, I was curious if if we're just going on some deep bit here of let's kick Sean off from the beginning. Let's just put him really on his back foot, make him work for this episode.
No, there was only brain worms. There was no bit.
All right. Well, I mean, hey, honest to God, I think we're gonna end up working for this episode anyway, all things considered. And just to really kind of put a fine point on that statement, I have two important notes before we get this episode going. First, we're going to be talking about a lot of shit in this episode. Minding the Gap is only ostensibly a skateboarding documentary. It goes way deeper than skateboarding in ways that I don't think either of us were prepared to deal with. So I'm going to put just content warning right out front for abuse of every kind you can think of, parental death. Am I missing anything, Jackson?
Animal abuse.
Animal abuse, just trauma in general. Honestly, I feel like we're going to be digging into that, like masculine trauma, toxic masculinity. There's a lot there, which does lead me into my second point. If this episode ends 3 minutes from now, unceremoniously, with my future editor self coming in and just being like, yeah, so sorry about that. Shit got heavy. Sorry, shit got heavy, because this is an episode that has the potentiality to veer off really hard into some absolutely personal shit for both Jackson and I. And we are starting off with this recording with the agreement that if either one of us is like, we've gone too far, we need to stop, we're stopping, the episode's over, that's all there is to it.
With that said, I'm going to get myself pumped up now. I'm going to get myself ready for this conversation. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Dead dads, dead dads, dead dads.
We watched Minding the Gap, which, as I said, is ostensibly a skateboarding documentary, but it's a documentary that the director Bing started off with being like, hey, I'm going to go interview a bunch of skateboarders and shit, and then started to slowly realize that there was a pattern of behavior emerging and slowly narrowed the focus down to two of his friends and examined their lives through the lens of abuse and how that shaped who they are today and where they're at in their lives, and how skateboarding is a release for them. But honestly, even that skateboarding pretense kind of starts to fade away as we just kind of start to focus on the melancholy of everyday life and also the abuse of everyday life. Wow, again, this movie is going to be hard to talk about. It's
the real shit, all the more so because it's about real people. Mm-hmm. It's a documentary. If this were like a fiction story, that's easier A, to compartmentalize, I think, and B, to talk about just from a craft perspective. If you have a problem with a character in a fictional story, you can just say that. They're not going to hurt their feelings because they're not real.
Well, I do think that there is a character in this that we can unequivocally say kind of a shithead, but
for sure. But even it's even talking about that character, and we use, of course, the word character in a literary discussions, and see, that's what I mean. It's weird.
No, especially, I mean, this one especially goes beyond just the standard documentary, because in documentary filmmaking, there's really kind of only two ways of approaching it. This is that occasional third way that we're going to get to in a minute here, but either you are designed to be fly on the wall and just not there at all. You're watching people have regular conversations and they are going about their lives on the day-to-day basis, or you insert yourself into everything and kind of become a character unto your own documentary, something along the lines of My Octopus Teacher that came out last year, a movie I have not watched, but also know that there's some controversy around because it sounds stupid and bad and weird, but that's neither here nor there. So this movie, on the other hand, though, I mean, as I said, the director Bing is basically creating a documentary about two of his I mean, I would call them close friends, but it's unclear like how close of friends they are. They're definitely acquaintances. They definitely know each other. They've definitely been skating with each other for a long fucking time.
He actually mentioned in an interview that, like, they were friends, but they weren't that close. Contrary, like I was under the impression they were much closer from the movie, but apparently not.
So, like, if nothing else, these people all know each other fairly well. So, Bing, Kier, and Zach are all, even if not like the best of friends, they're close enough and like grew up in the same circles and are aware of each other. And so, to put yourself into this documentary where you're basically taking people that casual acquaintances or more or less, and saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this with you." You basically have to put yourself into the documentary as well because they know you and they're going to interact with you. And Minding the Gap leans so far into that it really does feel like, for the most part, you're just watching a home movie that occasionally breaks to do something absolutely heartbreaking.
Yes, and I think that the form, it works really well. Like, it feels almost literary, like reading a fucking like William Faulkner or like a Hemingway short story about like sad people who just exist, but we're watching it for real in real time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the way that barrier, it's very loose. The filmmaking is in general is very loose, and I think that works, for the subject matter of just like, the freewheeling, skater culture of Rockford, Illinois, sad, small it's not that small, but sad Rust Belt city.
Something we're both fairly acquainted with growing up where we did.
Yes. And notice how I defaulted to putting small there because the sad Rust Belt town I grew up in was small. But so the way that Bing will insert himself into the story and like just talking to people, like just from behind the camera, but he only goes out of his way to make himself a character like really once, and even says in the film and includes this, like, even if I have my little interjections, like this part where I'm interviewing my mom about my abusive stepfather, this is the only part where you're gonna like shoot me like a character in the movie, but I'm also gonna be behind my own camera, like all set up like filming mom, like interview style. Very, very bold and brash, if I do say so myself, but it works really well. It helps give it that that Steinbeck feel. I'm trying to remember what really literary writer this reminds me of, and I can't land on it. But
what the fuck was the point of your English degree?
Nothing. But we already knew that.
Unfortunately, what I'm getting at here is that I can't help you with this because I don't have an English degree. I'm a marketing guy. Oh boy.
Oh fuck! What's his name? Not Steinbeck. Oh,
Mackie
I'm gonna kick
Donalds?
myself later. Mackie Donalds. The famous book, The Prawns by
Prawns by Mackie Donalds.
Anyway, I won't bog us down with literary discussions, but yeah, like I want to say, like, I'm not super well versed in documentaries. Like, I've watched a few. I'm not a complete stranger to them, but they're not my go-to movie type. So I don't want to like make any bold claims about like how super duper avant-garde this is, but it feels unconventional to me, just based off of my experience, in a way that is at once purposeful and yet not, that I appreciate.
As someone who, I guess a little bit of a backstory about me and why I picked this movie to watch is that I have always... I've never really been in the skate culture, but I've always been tangentially around the skate culture. I grew up skateboarding. I've been skateboarding my whole life. And like my friends that I hung out with in high school honestly feel a lot like the people in this film, even though really I was the only person that skateboarded. We were a little bit more into BMXing, me and a couple of my friends. But I mean, the bike culture is not that dissimilar from skate culture, all things considered. So I've always had, if nothing else, a bit of an attachment to the extreme sports culture. So I can speak a little bit to the fact that the style is not dissimilar from how skate videos are shot. I was reading a little bit of a essay about this movie, and they did point out that most skate videos are shot more from the ground up, like with a focus on the board and the feet, given that's where skating happens for the most part. And this is a little bit more up and above. But I mean, like, even in skate movies, there's a presence to the camera far more than a lot of other movies, especially when you're aware that the cameraman is also skateboarding as they're filming this most of the time. Like, they are skating with them a little bit in front of them, holding a fucking video camera at the ground in honestly what I consider to be just an absolute incredible feat of athleticism. But that's what I'm getting. It's like there's a little bit of truth and of personality to the cameraman of skate videos as it is. So to have that easily flow into this documentary feels very natural for the culture of skateboarding and extreme sports on the whole.
I would like to add to the he was filming while skating and doing some crazy stuff to get shot sometimes. When I picked up on that, as I eventually did, the Weenie Hut Jr., the Weenie Hut General inside me had like a panic attack during the skate scenes. Eventually, I eventually got over it, but like I had like, oh God, don't tumble.
Can I talk a little bit about the one time that I asked you to skateboard?
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
I got back into skateboarding in college after a short break, and I remember trying so hard. There was like a couple days after I got my skateboard for my birthday where I was like, Jackson, you have to try and skateboard. I just want to watch you try and do it. Like, you know, it wasn't even so much like I want to embarrass you or anything like that. I just have always wanted to get other people to do this with me. Like, this is why Sam is skateboarding with me now. Like, it's a culture that I want to share with people I care about and people I like. And you were just like, no, absolutely not. I'm gonna fucking fall on my face. It's gonna be an absolute nightmare. And I remember exactly where I finally got you to skateboard, and I don't know why I convinced you to do it going uphill on a skate, like on a sidewalk that had big cracks in it. Like, it's skatable. It was entirely skatable and something that I could handle no problem. But like, if you're just starting out, you don't know where to put your balance. You're going uphill and you like took like 3 steps, stumbled off and went, fuck it, I'm out. And I'm like, fair enough.
I am the biggest weenie. I fear nothing more than bodily harm coming to myself. I am fragile. I'm a fragile flower, as we all are. And remembering my physical form fills me with great distress.
Yes, and unfortunately, that is something that I've become a little bit more aware of as I've gotten older, which I do kind of find a bummer, because there was a long time there where the way to skateboard and the way to do a lot of extreme sports is to just go at it head empty. Because as soon as you think about either your bodily harm or like what you're trying to do, you will fuck up. And that is when you will get hurt. Like, to do tricks, you just have to do them. And if you're thinking about them, that's how you fuck up. As I said, like, as soon as I think, okay, I'm going to do a pop shove it, my mind starts thinking like, okay, I need to move my legs like this in order to do it, because I need to get that board pop, slide the foot up, kick the back leg out. And as soon as I start thinking about that, my timing that I've done this trick a million times all of a sudden goes completely out of fucking whack and I can't do it. Or I think, hey, while I try and do this, I'm gonna go up this curb and accidentally slam my ankle into it so hard that I can't skate for 3 months, and probably should have gone to the doctors but didn't because I was unemployed.
America.
Skateboarding is a really stupid hobby, and I love it quite a bit.
You know, obviously, as everyone now has great evidence to back up my claim that I'm the biggest weenie who ever lived. Even me, the biggest weenie who ever lived. Like, I got into hiking a lot more, of course, when I lived in the UP, because how could you not? But that's nowhere near like skateboarding. But even when I was like had to scramble around or like jump from like a rock, wouldn't even be that big of a jump, but I'm just paralyzed by the thought of what if I take the tumble, and then that makes it a lot worse, and it becomes a far bigger ordeal than it has to be because everyone else just leaps over the chasm like a gazelle. How
did you, at one point, Zach is skateboarding with his son in his arms. How'd you feel about that?
On the one hand, I was like, oh, that's sweet. He's like, you know, getting involved. But on the other hand, I was also like,
Sam absolutely hated. She's like, "Oh my god, that's I've never seen anything so terrifying." And I was just like, I know people who do skateboard. Like Tony Hawk has been on record. Like he took a video a long time ago with his daughter, I think, on like riding on the skateboard in front of him. Like they were on the same skateboard in his own private bowl. And people were like, "Oh my god, this is child endangerment." And he responded, he's like, "I fall more often walking than I do skateboarding. I trust myself with my child more on this board than I do off it." And like that's just something that I was thinking about in that scene where I'm like, this person, especially watching what they were doing, they were fucking good. Kier, I mean, not spoilers because it's a documentary, but like Kier does eventually get sponsored because he is fucking incredible at skateboarding. Oh my god, that dude can fucking shred.
It was actually really gratifying to, as someone who's not as familiar and maybe like wouldn't have the context to tell, like obviously, you know, he'd be better than me, but anyone who could ride a skateboard without falling off of it
up a hill on some cracks.
Yeah, so I wouldn't immediately have that context, but even without that title card at the end, it's really nice that like visually we do get some indications. We see a lot of him being like frustrated and really like grinding it out. And then, you know, towards the end, like especially when he's talking about wish my dad could see me and show that like this is a skill that I've been working on. That's like I could tell even just visually that he was improving. Like I didn't know, you know, didn't really have any idea that he was like sponsor worthy level, but even so, like for the narrative arc of the documentary, even for an outsider, it worked. And I was invested in Kier, you know, being a better skater and pursuing his passions because I love that guy.
He's great. No, he's an absolutely fantastic. He seems like a really great dude. I mean, obviously, and this is actually something I did want to talk about. I was thinking about this, but then I got sidetracked by skateboarding, which I'm worried is going to happen a couple times on this episode. And if it does, I apologize. I just do like skateboarding and talk about that. But part of the element of being like actually a character in the movie, like a kind of a 0.5 character in the movie, I suppose, is something that we talked about, I think last week actually, with Werner Herzog's Ecstatic Truth, and how documentaries can even take the truth and change things, and whether you can trust what a documentary is, what it's presenting. And as things start to get shitty in the movie, there's parts of me that I'm wondering, like, okay, how much of this is he protecting this person that he clearly has some connection to? Like, what is he actually showing? What isn't he showing? And the movie honestly does a really good job of basically, as you start to think this, dig deeper into what that exact thought of like, okay, hang on, this feels like we're missing part of the truth. And like, if you're not going to touch on that, I think that this is doing a disservice to your film. But clearly Bing recognizes that and starts to dig deeper into this, despite the fact that it is one of the most uncomfortable topics to broach, especially given that this is a documentary of people you fucking know. Like, this dude has some goddamn balls. Holy shit.
This dude has major fucking stones, the biggest stones. I could like, I mean, I'm working on a nonfiction thing right now, which is one of the reasons I found this movie interesting, but I'm just sitting there writing it. Like, if I could release it in secret and someone reads it later and be like, sorry, fucko. I could give it to them and like workshop it beforehand. I got all the time in the world, but this to just like get it to do it. Fuck it, we're doing it live. And to broach these subjects in this way. Oh my God, what a chat.
Yeah.
Like,
so listen, I think if you're ready, I think we should start to kind of explore spoilers a little bit here.
yes.
I think before we do, let's just get into this. Would you recommend this movie, Jackson?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is not for the faint of heart. It's very real. I got pretty emotional. I'm an emotional masochist though, so I wanted that, and that's what I got. Even if you're not like a skating person, it's like obviously I'm not. But even if you're not, like the way that the filmmaking is shot and like, you know, sort of the camaraderie and the freedom, like it makes you feel young watching those scenes, even if the most you took was like 3 steps on a skateboard, tumbled and said no thanks. Like, so I don't think that's a barrier at all. I mean, the only barrier would be like, how high is your tolerance for the real shit? And there is a lot of real shit, but it's gratifying. Like it's important work to be done, perhaps. So
if you are the type of person who does remember the skateboarding culture of the 90s and you're hearing Jackson talk about the real shit, even if you weren't necessarily a part of the culture, but like cognizant of it, you probably know that the 90s and early 2000s was really filled. It was the Jackass era where a lot of skateboarding videos was about like, oh, check out this dude. He shattered his arm and the bone is sticking out the back. Look at this. Isn't this gross and horrible? But skate culture on the whole has really moved away from that type of video. And while there's still a lot of it's a culture that now embraces the struggle of landing a trick and like reminds people that even pros can't land these things all the time and it takes a lot of hard fucking work. It no longer is the real shit in like, watch this dude fucking destroy his vas deferens on a rail type of thing. I was actually reading a Thrasher magazine and I had to put it down because I got to a story where somebody did do just that and they talked about how they had to get that repaired. And I'm like, this is not for me because I am not here to hear that.
I was wondering why you were being so specific.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's not the type of stuff that I want to hear. And in general, that's not the type of stuff where skateboarding is anymore. So if you're concerned that like that's what it's going to be, no, there is some crashes, but it is crashes and mostly like the fuck man, my hands are bleeding because I got road burn, not like fuck man, my elbow is bleeding because I just blew it out entirely. There's no grievous bodily harm.
It's a coming of age story through the lens of skate culture.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And this is all to say that I would heartily recommend it as well. So if you're looking for a documentary to watch and you want to feel bad about masculine culture and dead parents, this is the place to do it, I guess. It also really makes you, if you were someone in that type of group, makes you really yearn to not be an office drone, which is how I felt at the end of it. Very much just craving that freedom, which we're going to talk about because that's a very double-edged sword in its own right. Let's get into spoilers. But before we do, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Tell a friend about us. It's the only way we grow. patreon.com/BADHcast. It's going to be starting up again here very shortly. Go check it out. If you are already a member of our patrons, come tell us what you want us to watch. We don't have a movie we're watching yet in July, or, I mean, we even read a short book we have done previously. It has to be like under 10 hours at this point. I was going to say 20. Even that feels like a fucking stretch, but like short book, we'll do it. Short movie, we'll do it. Short series, we can probably fit that in. It might go out a little bit later, but we'll make it work.
Speaking of short books, my book isn't that short, but it's called Kelly's Unbreakable. You can buy it. I had to put it in.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Twitter.com/BADH_cast. Next week, we are the podcast of tonal whiplash. I think that is something that we have established in our 4 fucking years of hosting this goddamn show. We're going to be talking about the second Independence Day.
Yeah, a movie that nobody even remembers exists, but we already did the first one, so fuck it. It's 4th of July.
That's our life. That's what we do. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but Scooby-Doo. It felt like we were setting up for a poem there, and I needed to come up with a rhyme. Spoilers. Fuck it. I don't want to keep talking about that. Let's get into spoilers.
Spoilers. So Kier is. I want that man to excel. I treasure him forever, and I identified with him in so many ways. Like even just the little way. So yeah, Kier's got a dead dad. So of course, that's going to ring all my fucking alarm bells. As all our regular viewers will know, I too have a dead dad. I don't mention it very often, but it's a little known fact about me.
I always, listen. The problem is that like I've known you well enough to know that like these are you're very comfortable with people laughing at these. This is in the cadence of a joke. I still feel weird every time I laugh at it because you do present it in a very funny way that I can't help but laugh at. Like these are sincere laughter, but I do stop and just be like, should I be laughing at this?
And that's what we call Joker energy. But no, seriously, all memes aside, obviously, there were a lot of things about Kier's story that I identified with, although not 100%. It should be. It's worth noting that I can't exactly point and say it me. After all, Kier is black, and that racism societal thing is something that he talks about a lot, like coming to terms with this identity and like how that mattered to his dad and how that matters to him and like how that impacts his upbringing. So,
oh my God, the shot of him standing there while his white friends were watching a video where they used the N-word repeatedly and laughing at it was so painful. Holy shit.
Oh, it's so cringe. So yeah, I'm not here to point and say it me 100%. Indeed, I also did not have an abusive father, which Kier did, and the fact that his last interaction with his dad was not telling him, "Hooray, I'm going to Japan," but that "I hate you," and then storming out of the house makes that a lot more complicated. But a lot of the circumstances were similar, and a lot of the feelings and stuff I identified with, like coming to terms with your family as a person, like as people, reconciling like the fact that you loved a person and that, but at the same time they may have hurt you in some ways, and like coming to terms with all that shit. So needless to say, it was very real. It was the realest part for me. But even just some of the small details were a little scary, like Kier working as a fucking dishwasher. My first job was a fucking dishwasher, and let me tell you, I wouldn't wish that shit on my worst enemy. That's the worst job in the fucking world. It's just an endless slog, an endless nightmare of being elbow deep in other people's sloppy food grease, and then the line never ends. You're there 2 hours longer than everyone else in the kitchen because it's a never-ending nightmare. Just repetitive work over and over again. You're by yourself. Fucking madness. So, I saw that in myself too. And so, that really made me, root for him, not just like, come to some sort of peace about his childhood and his dad and his family, who, he clearly loves, but he has to get away from, and go out on his own, and he eventually does, and he gets sponsored. I'm glad it seems like things are going well. Kier, if you are listening to this, DM me and tell me that everything's okay, because I want everything to be okay for you.
The dude's like 6 years younger than us. That's a weird request.
All the more reason that he should do it, because maybe then there's some hope for me. Obviously, it's sort of weird because like the characters do have are sort of like compartmentalized. Like there are obvious links, not just with the skate culture, but of course abuse and fatherly abuse is kind of the other big one. So it's sort of weird to just like talk about this one person, because that implies that I didn't see anything in the other character stories, which of course I didn't. But I felt, if I as a critic, and being honest with myself, I'm talking about my emotional reaction to things, I very much had an emotional reaction to Kier's story, and it's I just wanted to express that, and I wanted to express how good of a job the film did of making me empathize with him and his struggles and his eventual successes. So
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna run with that and say that while I didn't have nearly as close of a connection to any of these characters as you did, for me, the connection came far more from a broader sense. As I said, I've been very tangentially related to skate culture and extreme sports culture for most of my life. I mean, I didn't even mention, like, I snowboarded for a long fucking time as well, and still have injuries from that, but that's not.
I was about to say, got another injury that you didn't look at.
I mean, which one do? Hang on, listen. If you want to take a break here, have a quick conversation about injuries I didn't take a look at. Last summer, I'm like 99% sure I broke a toe. Definitely screwed up my ankle. Way back when, I probably broke my collarbone snowboarding in like a hairline fracture type of way. Considering I still get twinges from it every now and again. That just like
that's the one I was thinking of.
Send just shocks of electricity through my body. I have a really nice scar underneath my left eye where I slammed a snowboard that was attached to my feet into my face, and in hindsight almost blinded myself in that eye, which is a great thought. The left side of my ribs, if you feel them, there is a distinct divot that doesn't exist on the right side, and I don't know whether that is natural or whether I cracked a rib at some point in my life. Yeah, listen, extreme sports, they're really bad, and the only time I've ever been to the hospital for a broken bone was when I broke a knuckle punching a telephone pole, which is actually relevant in this discussion.
It is tragically relevant.
Because anger is bad, y'all. Talk to a therapist. It helps. I promise. Don't punch poles. It's really bad. But like we'll get to that in time. Regardless, the point that I'm making here is like I connected more with the scene and like seeing these kids just that sense of freedom in, I guess, I mean, I want to be clear here that like I definitely grew up fairly privileged. You know, I didn't grow up rich or anything like that, but distinctly middle class. And like I'm not, I feel like I'd be saying like it'd be like poverty tourism to look at these kids in the way that, you know, I was like them. I wasn't. There was definitely a middle class element to all of my friends. However, the kid standing on the roof yelling, "I'm fucking drunk, God bless America," or "Happy birthday, America," I felt in my fucking bones. Like, holy goddamn shit. And I'm going to even come out and say that I was absolutely a fucking weenie as far as like drugs and alcohol went as a kid. Like I definitely had a rough crowd, and like some of them did drink and some of them smoked pot when I was a kid. And I 100% Scout's honor will tell you that I did not at all. This is not me just being the goody two shoes, pat myself on the back. I do in some regards regret not as an adult looking back on it.
Same. Yep. In case it wasn't clear, I was also exactly that kind of weenie too. So I've been compared. I've never been more shook than when a friend looked me dead in the eye and asked why I was Armin from Attack on Titan. And I can't disagree with that comparison.
I should also clarify, if we do have younger listeners listening right now, this is not an endorsement of like go out and do drugs and drink and stuff like that. Like seriously, I regret not doing it, but at the same time, I am incredibly happy that I didn't in hindsight. Like there is a part of me that is genuinely super proud of how I went through high school. So like seriously, chase your own bliss, do what you need to do, just be aware of who you are and what you want to do with yourself, and don't get into trouble doing this stuff. Like this is not an endorsement. I just want that to be perfectly clear despite what I am saying here.
Yes, that's sound advice. We are old men just grumping about in our old men ways right now.
Yeah, please do not like go out and do this stuff. And as an aside, if you think you broke your collarbone, tell your friend's mom. They will take you to the hospital, despite the fact that they said that they're not taking any trips to the hospital that day. It's a better idea to go to the hospital than to live with a broken collarbone the rest of your life. Don't do it. Just tell them that you think you broke a bone.
I have nothing to add on that point because I'm still that kind of weenie.
Yeah. Tell them. Anyway, the culture is what I keep doubling back on. Like my friends were very much in that sort of, they had that energy to them, like just a chaotic, wild, rambunctious energy of just like, fuck everything, fuck the rules, fuck it all. Let's just fucking do it and be legends. Before that was a sentence that Jackson uttered to me. We very much
before that was I want to clarify, before that was a sentence one of the executives of Firefest uttered to the other executives of Firefest. That's where that meme comes from. I didn't realize I didn't tell you that.
You might have. I probably forgot. Regardless, it has just become a Jackson quote in my mind.
All according to plan.
Regardless, yeah, that the energy that they exude here was very much the type of energy that like I lived admittedly in a little bit more of a sterile suburban way, but it was something that like I recognized, and something that watching this I deeply yearned for, even as it is very much an expose of the issues that we deal with. And I mean, I was seeing things in this movie that I saw even myself growing up. Like I saw that anger at everything and nothing in it, and like the way that people were just trying to be it's a lot to unpack. I apologize. And this is why we did put that warning ahead of time of like, hey, this episode might just abruptly end, and if it does, we apologize. But like, and I do want to stress as well, I had a fine home life. Like everyone, there's not someone out here that can raise their hand and be like, hey, do you have issues stemming from the way you were raised with your parents? That could say, no, everything was perfect. But like, was not abused. Generally happy home life. Really, it was fine. But like that toxic masculinity, that element of like Kier at one point was asked, hey, you know, you need to go get a job. You need to be doing something with your life. What are you doing? You're just sitting around. Why are you sleeping until 1? That was something that I felt at home. Like that hit real fucking close to home, because I'm like, the kid's 18 at this point. He doesn't need to have it all figured out yet. He doesn't need to be working towards some grand plan right now. Let him live his life. Let him chase his bliss. And like, that is absolutely just an attitude that's been passed from parent to child, and something that Kier dealt with, something that I dealt with. And like, there is definitely some truth to it, as he does go get a dishwashing job and eventually graduates beyond that and chases his own path. But like, that is something that it's really hard to impart on a kid and like force onto a kid when the kid is just like not there yet, especially because let fucking kids live their goddamn lives. Like seriously,
you know, again, the difference. I'm gonna take at your word. I'm not you know trying to assume blanket statement, but the difference, of course, between like our dad saying that shit and Kier's dad saying that shit is that our dads did not also like physically harm us in that same way. And so I think that like a common thread that I'm sort of seeing in both of what we're saying is something that I think the movie's good at, and something that I think the text of the movie deals with well, is that like, even if the situations aren't exact, it can be important to draw these kind of parallels. And I mean, that's kind of the point of art, right? To sort of like, you know, put a mirror on reality and, you know, see whatever kind of capital T truth is there. But the text of the movie also makes it very clear that these experiences aren't the same just because there are similarities, just because Bing sees some of his experience with abuse in, fuck, Kier. I wanted to call him Pierre, and I realized that wasn't right.
We've been saying his name this entire time, but now it's gone.
No, like I literally, like I confess, like I just didn't want to say Pierre, and I almost did, and now I'm outing myself. But Kier, you know, with him and Bing's life, like, you know, there's those similarities, but even their situations are not exactly the same, whether that be the particular kinds of racial struggles that Kier goes through. Although as an Asian American, of course, Bing has different ones. That is not made as explicit in the text, although considering some of the stuff that's going on, you can definitely see some of the parallels, I think. And I think that's a reason that he brought so much attention to the ways that like Kier's race sort of puts him in a difficult position amongst his predominantly white friends. And, you know, again, it brings it all back with that so effective scene of them watching the N-word video. But like, you know, there's that. And so it's not just that the backgrounds are different, how that impacts you. The outcomes are also different because, of course,
I can see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant.
No, Mewtwo, they're very relevant. That's the point. They're very relevant. They shape who we are.
I was thinking about that quote a lot watching this movie, actually, because there is like, it's kind of funny that you're right. They are very relevant and they very much do shape who we are. But like, there is an element to it too of like, I can see now that the fucking circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant, in that like, you do watch one of these kids take his cycle of abuse, break from it, and go do great things, or at least ostensibly break from it. I want to couch everything I say here because it is a documentary that like there is documentarian sway in how all this works, and we don't necessarily always have full pictures. Whereas Zach goes the other way and seems to lean a lot more into the cycle of abuse that he has been dealing with in a far more self-destructive way. And like that's more what I meant by like circumstances of one birth, because you can take what you learn from it and go one way or the other, but that also does play into what you were saying about the fact that it is very important. So, yeah.
And one thing that makes the movie difficult, like with regards to Zach, is that I was saying to Sean, maybe the one criticism that I had, and I'm not sure it's a fair criticism or even a real criticism, but it's this idea that we have this parallel between the abuse that they all suffered, but particularly Kier and Bing, that they suffered, is paired very, very purposefully through editing with the revelation that Zach has been an abusive partner, and that is something, again, you're dealing with real people
that he knows,
like in some ways that wrestling with, like, this is a person that I care deeply about and that, I consider a friend, but also like this friend has turned into exactly the sort of monster that like terrorized me when I was a child. That feels like something. It's not that the movie doesn't address it, or again, even that it needs to address it, because that might not be fair for me to ask.
I do want to interject you really quick and say that it definitely does address it through a really effective use of the Kuleshov effect. But
yes, there's a lot of good stuff in the filmmaking to draw those parallels, and that's all great.
And if you don't mind, I'm just going to really quickly break that down, because I just said a set of jargon there, especially if you have not watched this movie and are like, what the fuck is the Kuleshov effect and what the fuck are you talking about?
Probably a good idea.
Yes, the Kuleshov effect is basically the idea that if you pair two images next to each other in a film, like scene A, scene B, that you will form a connection between the two of them. So if you put a picture of a Coke can, I think I'm basically cribbing this strictly from Dan Olson's video talking about this, where if you put a picture of a Coke can and then a picture of someone glaring in that direction, it will appear that that person is glaring at the Coke can, despite the fact that there's no clear connection between the two of them. That is a very broad example of the Kuleshov effect and how it works for like communication and like A-B conversations in film. However, it can also be used to create a sense of meaning between two shots, where early on in the film, Bing, in interviewing his mother about the abuses that he dealt with, has a reaction to her talking about how horrible it was just across the board. And then later when he's interviewing Zach, and Zach, I think, says like, sometimes you just have to slap a bitch or something like that, just something horrible like that.
Yeah.
It immediately cuts back to the same reaction Bing gave interviewing his mother. The same scene Bing gave interviewing his mother in this statement, and it works incredibly effectively, despite the fact that at no point Bing comes out and says, hey, I think that Zach did something horrible here. It's very well implied thanks to this Kuleshov effect in editing, and it's brilliant filmmaking.
It is, and I don't want to disparage that at all. I guess from my own subjective viewing experience, and again, I'm even torn about saying this, because I think that the literary kind of Spartan style of just like letting things happen and not inserting himself too much is overall good, but like that was the area where I was wondering about Bing's interiority the most, where I like maybe wanted him. I understand necessarily not confronting like Zach or having that conversation with Nina where she's like, no, like don't like bring it up, that'll just make things worse for me. I completely understand that from like a person existing with other people, like ethics perspective. But even if it was just like Bing talking a little bit more as like a narrator, like that I don't know, that might have, I was thinking a lot about his interiority with that stuff, because that felt like the movie to me, and like sort of the core of the movie, but it was one of the less like explicitly talked about things, and that might not even be a problem. I don't know, but it was something I was thinking about.
I think that that's entirely what the movie wants you to think about. I think that in admitting that, I think you are admitting that the movie did exactly what it wanted you to do, because Bing kept himself so far like not so far removed, but he kept himself removed enough that it would have felt weird if he came out and started talking about that in some capacity. And was much more interested in letting the film do the speaking for him, like explaining how he feels about it and how he interacted with this revelation. And I mean, it does go even beyond from there to explore like interviewing with Zach's girlfriend and conversations there and talking about to Zach about like everything that went on there, because boy, that kid goes some dark fucking places, I'll tell you what. But like, I think it's very much the type of thing where he did talk more about it, and it's called Minding the Gap on the Whole.
No, that's fair. I think you're probably right.
I think that I will say, I think to your credit, if this was a more narratively driven like script movie, not a documentary, yeah, there absolutely should have been a bit more of a conversation about it. But when it is a documentary about himself and the people around him and the cycles of abuse that gets perpetrated by them, yeah, I mean, it is speaking unto itself. It's metatextual at that point.
Yeah. I don't know, Danny. It's difficult.
I will also accept my $10 for fitting metatextual into a conversation.
Cool shot effect, metatextual. You're just banking all them word bucks today.
Yeah, I'm this is apparently where I listen. Okay, let me rephrase that. The fact that I flourish when talking about fucking up your own butt skateboarding documentaries about abuse should be the least surprising thing in the fucking world, if we're being honest with ourselves.
It is quite unsurprising.
Yeah,
I will agree with that.
I hadn't really considered that, but yes.
I mean, there might not be a more you movie, I dare say.
Yeah, at least not a more me documentary. Like,
sure,
there's different types of me movies. Like, those off-kilter weird ones. Greener Grass is the one that springs to mind for me. Is a movie that I cannot get out of my head. And I have talked about it previously on the podcast. If you have not watched Greener Grass and you want to get a really good idea of what makes me fucking tick, it's on Hulu. Watch Greener Grass. It is so weird and so strange, and I cannot recommend it enough. But I think this is, like, if you're looking for something that's just, like, flat out, this is Sean, Minding the Gap is probably the way to go with it.
Yeah, at least in terms of subject matter, sad Rust Belt skaters. Like, I mean, it's right there.
Especially like, as I said, the energy that this movie gives is so palpable to how I felt growing up. And this is what I was talking about. Like, I feel so weird watching this now, and like I've spent most of my day thinking, like, man, I do yearn for that sort of wild, enviable freedom that they portray in this movie. But I mean, even then, it's not necessarily portrayed in the best way, and part of me wonders if it's just me yearning for that childhood energy of it, or whether, like, and it's something that I reconcile with every day. Like, I do feel like a corporate suit, which is great for life security, for job security. I by and large enjoy what I do, but like, there are days where I'm just like, what if I just grabbed a skateboard and ran? Like, that sounds wonderful. I'll go find a fucking part-time job at some fast food place and I'll scrabble to make ends meet, but I'll feel free in a way that I can. I mean, that sort of ennui is something that has permeated culture for a really fucking long time. I mean, fuck, what was that road trip movie with Dennis Hooper? I want to call it Wild Hogs. It's not Wild Hogs.
Wild Hogs. It is not Wild Hogs. I mean, I guess it's kind of Wild Hogs.
It's kind of Wild Hogs, yeah. But I mean, like, what's the fucking name of the movie?
Oh God, Easy Rider.
Easy Rider. Yeah, I mean, Easy Rider is honestly fairly about that same ennui and that same desire to break away from this type of thing. But like, that movie I enjoyed, but didn't connect with me as much. This one hits home in a way because this is who I was for the longest fucking time. Those were my friends, both the good and the bad, as a result of them. It is a really hard movie to watch because of that.
Yeah, and I think that, like, there's the other element too, maybe unlike Easy Rider, which like really revels in the like sweeping shots of like bikes and like the road trip. It's like you really get the feeling more so here, like, you know, the characters in Easy Rider like talk about feeling trapped, but we see what being trapped is. We see being elbow deep in that fucking dishwasher job. Like, that's being trapped. We hear the, you know, all the like news clips about how shitty it is to live in Rockford, Illinois.
Oh my God. We didn't even talk about the fact that the billboard shots are so goddamn good. Oh my God.
I love the billboard shots.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Sorry, you said Rockford and I remembered that. Oh my God. Listen, if you ever want a movie where the city is a character, it's this fucking movie. Oh my God.
It's really good about that. Yeah, the place is interesting, and it's another thing that's not, I expected it to be more overt, but aside from a couple of times that, like, I think Kier is really the only one who talks about it, but otherwise it's mostly expressed through the filmmaking, like through the shots and the billboard shots and inserting like certain clips. And yeah, because then there's like, when characters do leave, it's a big deal, and there's the kind of leaving like Kier does leave and it feels great. Zach leaves and it doesn't feel so great because he just abandons his son for, you know, months at a time out of nowhere
and comes back, which is another thing that like I see echoes of in my own life in a lot of ways, not in myself, but in people I knew growing up. It's really rough. It is, the parallels of my own life are deeply unnerving. Again, white privilege in a whole nother way, but like just the way that some of these characters acted and went is horrifying.
Yeah, that's why, again, so happy for Kier. I really hope the documentary ain't fooling me. I really hope that he's as great as he seems and everything worked out for him. So again, Kier, you know, hit me up in those DMs, Kier. You better tell me that it's all good. Better tell me that it's all good. Please, I need to know that it's gonna be okay. I say this, you know, because speaking of being trapped, I am, of course, currently recording this from the shithole town I went to high school in, when I should be in a city by the sea under Mount Fuji right now. Not bitter.
Yeah. This is a movie that will probably resonate with everyone in some form or another, and if it doesn't resonate, you're at least going to find something interesting in it. It's a fantastic film, and I guess in closing, I would like to say that if you're watching this and you see yourself in it in any way, shape, or form, and even if you don't see yourself in it in any way, shape, or form, go talk to a therapist. The cycles of abuse, even if they are not as outward as they are in this film, can be insidious and can leave lingering scars. Like I mentioned, you know, there were scenes that like I saw and had my own feelings and reactions to, like when Bing's brother was talking about his dad walking in and seemed fine and then was really mad. Like my dad never walked in and cut my hair or anything like that, but there were definitely days where like I thought everything was great and I was just sitting on the couch reading or doing something absolutely harmless, and my dad will come in at 3 p.m. and just be like, what the fuck are you doing? Go out and do something, or like just yell at me entirely unexpectedly. And again, he's probably listening to this. I love my dad. We have a great relationship now. I again do not think that he was a poor father or anything like that, but those are the things that will echo through, and those are the things that do lead to just uncertain anger and punching pulls and stuff like that. And seriously, talk to therapists, get help, find yourself, learn how to express emotions in a healthy way. You'll feel better for it. This episode brought to you by therapy.
Here. Oh, if only we had that sponsorship.
By the idea of therapy. Listen, therapy, if you're out there, get in touch with us. We want to talk to you. Final words, Jackson?
This movie is real great, and it's real sad, but there's some hope in it too. That's life.
That's the best type of movie. That rings our fucking bells. Who are we to fucking joke about it? Jesus Christ. We're nihilist fucks, but you know, we do like that little twinge of hope in everything we deal with. That's why I really like Snowpiercer. Go listen to that episode if you're looking for like the true Sean nihilism, but pulling hope out of nothingness. I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. That's really all I got going on.
I'm Jackson Keller. You can buy my book, which is a fiction story about miserable people in a Rust Belt town called Kelly is Unbreakable on Amazon now. You can follow me on Twitter at JacksonJKeller.
It's a good book. You should go buy it. I heartily endorse it, and he did not pay me to say that. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. As I said, that's going to be opening up soon again. So if you want to support us, keep an eye on that. And if you are already supporting us, tell us what you want us to talk about. We will talk about it. We'll take suggestions. As always, thanks to those at the Highway for use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band, and you should go check them out wherever you can, however you can. Buy their music, stream their music, support their music. They're on Bandcamp, Spotify, all them good places. Go do it. Also, thanks to 25 Years Later Site.com. There's a little button of us in the corner that you can click on, but you should absolutely check out all the really talented people doing a lot of really talented writing while you are over there. Next week, we are changing gears about as hard as physically possible and talking about Independence Day 2. Is it called Independence Day 2? Genuinely asking.
It's called Independence Day Resurgence.
Right. That's a terrible name.
I'm sure it's going to be a terrible film.
You haven't I thought you watched it at some point.
No, I haven't seen this one.
Oh, I remember you and our roommate talking about seeing it. Like, that's why you watched the first one when we were in college together.
I actually watched the first one. I think we did talk about seeing it eventually, but I think that was brought on because we actually watched the first one because I had to watch it for a class.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was about American cinema and like the depiction of like American nationalism. It was a great class. This is where I watched Easy Rider for the first time too.
Fuck, I'm so jealous that you took a bunch of cinema classes in college. I really should have, and I didn't. I'm so upset. Fuck.
They were all my favorite classes I took for sure,
Fuck.
bar none.
Fuck. Fuck. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go